Amen. So, some of the questions that are being asked, I don't have comprehensive answers to. Some of them are, I guess, coming to the limit of my understanding, which I guess is not really a surprise. So I'll try the best that I can do to answer some of these questions. I don't know good answers for all of them. So, or any of them perhaps. First question: if the temple was finished in 2014, does that mean after this date no priest came in? And if they come in, what temple was finished?
So can you repeat the question?
I'll repeat the question. I'll repeat it in my own words, so it may be a little bit easier to understand. The questioner has understood that I have said in the past that when we speak about the model of constructing temples or buildings, that I've suggested that the temple was completed in 2014. And the reason why this has taken people by surprise is because there are presentations in the public domain that have indicated that the completion of the temple is still future, or it's, you know, we're in the finishing touches now, some kind of combination of the two. So the question's asked, if it was finished in 2014, what are the implications of that? If I can just summarise it that way. Question not clear? You can ask me.
Yeah, to your question, I want to clarify, why do you call the building, what do you call the building of the temple?
Let me ask you a question. Have you heard about the symbol of the foundations being laid?
Yeah.
You've heard that. When it talks about foundations, you know you're not in agricultural territory. You know it's not talking about a marriage. Foundations are to do with construction. You okay with that?
Yeah.
What are those foundations of? What is the building that they're the foundations of? What building are you going to put onto those foundations, according to your understanding when we talk about the foundations?
The temple.
Okay, so that's what we're dealing with.
Okay.
So everybody okay on in the framework that we're talking about. So it's the temple. We call it the temple. We could call it something else. We could call it the house of David, if that's maybe more comfortable for you. The house of David could be symbolised as a house, or it could be symbolised as his posterity, his family, the family tree, the house of David, all the kings that come after him, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, etc. They're all his children, grandchildren, if that makes sense.
Does it mean, like, this temple is the remnant sort of foundation?
I'm not trying to define what it is. What the question is, whatever that temple was a symbol of, which is a different subject. It's like temple equals what? The question is, what is that temple equal to? Is it equal to a message, a corporate movement, individuals? Maybe we've got some misunderstandings of that. Maybe we haven't fully understood what that meant. I'm not trying to address that. All the question is asking, if it was finished in 2014, what are the implications of that? So, let me see if I can take us to a verse that might help us. see if I can find a Bible passage that might help. I'm not going to find it. So let's go to Acts 15. So in Acts chapter 15, we'll go to the verse in a second.
So what is 2014? What represents 2014? I mean, how do you get to 2014?
How do you get to that?
Maybe I missed something, but what is 2014?
2014 is the beginning of the latter rain for the priests.
Okay.
Oh, it's rubbed off. You've never heard that? Or?
I probably have, but I'm sorry, I don't...
Okay, yeah, I'm sure you have. It's been in our consciousness for quite some time as a movement.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have heard of it.
Sorry, it comes back to me.
Okay, so what we'll do is, keep your hand there, and I want to go to Amos 9:11. Okay, so if you go to Amos 9:11, if we're going to do this properly, we're not going to do it. What you need to do is find out when Amos's ministry is happening, what the historical context is, so you can ascertain exactly what he's speaking about in its literal context. Therefore, you can make a much more accurate and correct prophetic application. Does all that make sense? Yeah? Everyone else, does that make sense? So what we'd do, we'd go to chapter 1 verse 1, we'll begin there, chapter 1 verse 1. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. So there's a lot of information, a lot of symbology. We'd want to know what Tekoa meant, because we'd probably pick up some information from that. There's an earthquake that's mentioned, it's 2 years before the earthquake. But it's talking about the days of Uzziah and the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So this Jeroboam, if you were going to check, this would be Jeroboam number 2, not the original Jeroboam. We've already discussed the original Jeroboam, if you recall. This was the prophecy that begins at 391 years. This was Jeroboam 1, who makes the 2 calves, one in Bethel, one in Dan. Everybody, that's not too fast? Is that okay? There's the Jeroboam after Saul, David, Solomon, Jeroboam, Rehoboam. It's not that Jeroboam, it's Jeroboam, what we call number 2, Jeroboam 2. It's being referred to here in Amos. And this is in the days of Uzziah, king of Jerusalem, king of Judah. And if you were to go to Isaiah, I think you'd find that this is where Isaiah is. If you remember, we did that diagram about Isaiah's ministry. It's at the same time period. So if you check who Uzziah was, Uzziah is a good king and the nation is prosperous. Not only is it prosperous under his reign, if you go to the northern tribes, Ephraim, it's also a prosperous nation. So everything's looking good. That's the context of Amos. So if, jumping back to chapter 9, if you go to verse 1, it talks about smiting the lintel. And there's, without understanding, the details of that, it's some kind of prediction of punishment that's about to happen. You could see that if you start reading the verses at the beginning of chapter 9. Verse 4, and though they go into captivity before their enemies, thence will I command the sword, and it shall slay them, and I will set mine eye upon them for evil and not for good. So it talks about impending punishment or destruction. Are we all okay with that? So after all of that, verse 11, in that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and all the heathen which are called by my name, saith the Lord that doeth this. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the ploughman will overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him that soweth seed. So we'll stop there. So it talks about the tabernacle of David. The tabernacle of David that's been fallen is going to be raised up again. Is everybody okay with that so far? So this tabernacle of David that's fallen, what does it mean that it's fallen? Because this is in the time period of Uzziah. Solomon's temple, if you're going to take this as David's tabernacle, or David's temple, has it been destroyed yet? No, it hasn't actually been destroyed yet. So when it talks about, in that day I'll raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, has it fallen symbolically in those days?
Yes.
Okay, it has, because they're not taking care of the tabernacle in the way that they're supposed to. Because there's been a moral fall, which is going to be followed by a physical destruction. Then there's going to come a time period afterwards that it's going to be raised up. So it talks about the tabernacle of David. So if you jump back to Acts 15, so Acts chapter 15, this is the Jerusalem Council, if you went back to chapter 1. Sorry, paragraph 1. And we want to go back to verse 13. And this is Acts 15:13. And after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon, Peter, hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. What's he talking about there? What is Acts 15:14? Miss Rema?
What's going on there?
What's that referring to? Peter has declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out a people for his name.
Oh, Peter went to Cornelius.
So this is Cornelius. Hopefully we're all okay with that. It's referring back to Peter's vision that he had at Simon the tanner's house. And to this agree the words of the prophets. And so now he's going to quote Amos chapter 9, verse 11. He's going to quote that as it's written. So at the time when Peter had done that, remember when he came back, in fact when he went, what did he do? He took witnesses with him because he knew he was going to get into trouble. He knew it was against the law to do that. He tells Cornelius, it's against the law what I'm doing, but I'll do it anyway. He takes witnesses so they can see evidence of what he's doing. And his defence was what? What was his defence? It wasn't a thus saith the Lord. It was the Holy Spirit descending upon them, and they start speaking in tongues or glorifying God. And he says that's enough evidence for us to baptise. But now they've studied the subject more, and now they've got a thus saith the Lord to what they're doing.
He also had the vision before. He had the vision of the unclean food coming 3 times.
Yes. So he has the vision, but there's no evidence for that. So that's why he takes the witnesses, because he knows he's going to get in trouble. So the evidence that he knows, the vision is God sort of telling him to go and visit, but he doesn't know he's allowed to baptise even at the vision stage. It's when the Holy Spirit comes down, he says, this is the evidence that they should be with us. So he has the vision too. That's correct. To this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, After this, I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doth all these things. So I'm open to your consideration of what verse 17 is saying. I'll tell you what I think, and then you tell me what you think. We're okay with that? So I'm suggesting that there are three groups of people, if you like. I'm going to make an application. There's the builders, there's the residue, and there's the Gentiles. The reason I'm saying that is because 17, some people might read that the residue of men is a repeat and enlarge of all the Gentiles. So you might read it that way, that the residue and the Gentiles are the same group of people, repeat and enlarge. I'm suggesting that it's not. And what I want to suggest is, if we were to make an application, which I'm going to do, that's my reference point to jump into this subject about the temple. I'm saying that this movement, the priests, have built a temple, if you're okay with that. And when we build this temple, verse 17, and the reason we've built this temple is so that the residue means remnant, the leftover, the remnant of men might seek after the Lord. And I'm saying that's the Levites. And then it says, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called. Come out of her, my people. God's name is upon these Gentiles. They're the specific ones that's been identified here. And the residue of men might seek after the Lord at this temple. And not only them, but also the Gentiles would join them.
Which are the three groups you said?
The people who are building, that's us, we've built the temple. Then the Levites, the residue, the remnant are going to join, and then the Gentiles join as well. So
Where does it say about the builders?
it doesn't. I'm making an application.
Verse 16.
Could the residue build the builders?
After this I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up. It mentions that God is going to do that work, and I'm saying that's us. We read that at 9:11. After those days, the Lord's going to rebuild the tabernacle of David. Yep.
It's God who builds up the building.
No, it's us. You go back to every model that you want to. It's not God that builds these structures, it's human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. But can this human being be the residue?
I'm telling you how I see it.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
So if you, that's what I'm saying, yeah, so if you ask me, don't ask me, because I've told you my answer.
Yeah.
You tell me what you think. I'm saying the builders is this movement, us. The residue are the people who are going to go into the temple, and there's going to be another group, which is the Gentiles. That's where I'm seeing the two groups, the builders, the residue, and the Gentiles.
But the residue, the way I understand it, the residues are those who are out of the false, of the falling temple. The residue are the one who are works in a way, the wheat, it's the wheat in a way. Those who are not fallen with the.
I don't want to use another parable to explain this group.
Yeah.
The remnant, I'm suggesting that the Levites.
Okay. Residue.
The word residue means remnant.
Yeah. So these are the Levites. Okay.
I'm saying that they're the remnant. You go to Revelation 12:17, the remnant of the seed. This church, essentially, there has to be someone who builds so that the residue can come and worship.
Right.
So if you're okay with that, understanding that logic, it's an argument to show that there's a distinction between priests and Levites. Priests build, Levites come and worship in there. There's a clear distinction between the two, and between the Gentiles. If people can see that.
We, in our study of the temple, it gets set up beginning on the first day of the first month, so that last few words in verse 16 tells you when it even begins. And I will set it up. It's set up beginning on the first day.
Which verse did you go to?
Verse 16.
Yeah, the verse that first day of the first month.
Yeah.
That's which verse was that?
That's in Numbers or...
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you'd
No,
slipped your
not
finger with that.
verses.
Okay,
And the temple begins to
Yeah.
be built 9/11.
Sister Shimon.
Acts 15:16, I think.
No, Elder Jeff said.
Set it up.
Yeah, no, he said
Okay.
the first day of the first month is
Right.
where it got set up. I thought he slipped his finger into that Bible verse. It's.
So how are you linking the residue to, sorry if I've missed that, how are you linking the residue to the Levites?
I'm saying residue means remnant. That's all I'm saying. And if we're the builders, I think we all agree this movement is building a temple. Who are we building the temple for? It seems to me we're building a temple for people to come and worship in.
I know this sounds silly, but can't we build it for ourselves? If you look at like Noah, isn't that the same thing? Aren't we meant to go into that temple as well?
I'm not arguing that we're not going in the temple as well.
Oh, okay.
All I'm saying is, to me, I can see three groups of builders. They're building it for a second group of people. They're not building it for themselves.
The builders are the remnant.
No, I'm saying in this context, the builders are not the remnant. God is the builder for the remnant. Yep. Okay, so I'm arguing this point now to try and locate how that's working. If you take 1989, 2001, Sunday law, close of probation, second advent, we know here, this is the loud cry, and I'm going to do it this way here, the loud cry. Therefore the loud cry begins here and goes all the way to that way mark. We're okay with that? This loud cry is a cry of 18 verse 4 to say, come out of her and into the temple. This is the Gentiles. And it identifies what kind of Gentiles, those who are called by God's name. So, I'm not using the exact model that's given here, but I just want to take a concept to say, if we're going to build this model, what are we telling them to come into?
Is that 2001?
Yeah, it was this line, sorry, I did put a 1 there, but that line, 2001, 9/11. What are we calling them out of? I mean, we discussed this to some degree. We call them out of a system, and so they're going to come into another system. So we would normally say they come out of Babylon and they come into Jerusalem, the glorious holy mountain. You can make that point. We're okay with that. So another way to describe it in respect to the temple, I'm saying you come out of her and you go into the temple. Are we okay with that? Okay, that with that, Brother Daniel? Yeah. That's your question. So if you're going into the temple, I'm saying that infers that the temple is already finished. As soon as you finish the temple, then you call the group of people in. If you're okay with that. So I'm saying here, the temple is complete. I finished with Acts 15 and Amos 9. I'm not making a reference back to that three groups. I'm making a different point, but I just want to show that we expect the tabernacle to be rebuilt, and it's going to be rebuilt by priests, and it's for God's people in a general or generic term. If you go back to Herod's temple, which is the Rubberballs temple that gets modified, what they actually do is they actually deconstruct the whole temple and rebuild it. It's not just some, repainting or something. It's a major reconstruction. In fact, they essentially rebuild it. And the people who do that rebuilding work is the priests in real life. Because Herod wanted to get all his expert workmen, and they said, no, you can't have Gentiles rebuilding that temple. God's people have to do it. And it was the priests that actually did that work. So you can see that's just a reference back to this, that the priests are the ones that are doing this rebuilding. So I'm saying, separate to that the temple's complete here, if we're okay with that. So just simply, if we were to take that line of thought and bring it to the line of the priests, this would be 1989, 2001, 9/11, and this would become 2014, and this would be Raphia and Panium. So I'm saying, based upon this template, that the temple is complete here. Are we all okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's relatively simple logic. The temple's complete here, the temple will be complete here. Yeah? Now, I want to stress that I'm not trying to identify a two-tier priesthood. I'm not trying to teach that, I don't believe that. If it's true, if someone showed it to me, I would accept. I'm not saying it's error, but I haven't seen that there's this two-tier priesthood. So, what we're saying here...
What do you mean by two-tier priesthood? Two types of priests and Levites?
No. Two types of priests, not Levites. Levites separate. Actually priests, like you got the ancient men and the less ancient, or the newbies, or the clever priests and the ones who are sort of second-rate citizens, that kind of concept. There's not two qualities of priests. We're all brethren. Yes. I'm not trying to argue that there isn't an organisation, but I'm saying there's not a hierarchy in quality of priest. We're all the same. Part of the reason why I don't believe that, I think one of the reasons why we've got this time period is for people, if I can put it this way, to catch up, for all of us to come to a common position, a common base. I think there's that time period that allows us to do that. So I'm saying, just here, where there's a loud cry that says, come out, there's going to be a loud cry in this history here. And this loud cry is for God's people. It's not to come out of Babylon. It's to come out of the Laodicean condition and come into the temple that's already been built, this complete temple. So the people that are doing and receiving, is it I-E or E-I? E-I? So there's the doing and there's the receiving. The people who are doing the call, these are priests. And the people that are receiving the call, they're also priests. It's because of this structure that when people are looking at this history, for a long time people thought that this loud cry, which we were expecting, it was called PBM for a while. It's been called PBM. That this cry was to Levites, so they'd be crying to Levites to come and join us. So I'm saying that's not correct. It can be demonstrated that that's not correct. So the people that are calling out, that being called in, is the priest in this history. It's the last remaining priest. I think today it's reasonably fair to say that, I don't know what percentage, but the vast majority of the people in this movement are post-2014 people. You know, it's much more than 50%. There are very few people who have been in the movement before 2014. That's my observation when I've gone around the world. So, the temple was complete here, and this history is the calling of the priests. And they're going to join the movement, so hopefully that's all okay. So his question is, if the temple was finished in 2014, I've explained why I'm saying that. We went to Amos, and we went to Acts 15. Elder Jeff's placed us that this is the first day of the first month, which is when the temple began to be built. And I'm saying it got built in this history here. Does this mean after this date no priest can come in? So obviously you can see that I'm saying no. The priests are supposed to come in, this last group of priests who haven't come for whatever reason. And if they come in what temple? What temple was finished? This temple, the Tabernacle of David. I don't know what this temple means.
Jen, could you repeat this?
The question is, if it finished in 2014, what about all the priests? What happens to them? Does that mean no priest can come in? And I'm saying, yes, priests can come in. It's following exactly the same model. Once the temple's finished, God's people, this other group of people can come in. What's thrown people is that the people that are coming in are priests. So you can see that there are two groups of priests, if I can say it that way. One group that came in here and one group that came in here. But I want to preface that by saying I don't think there's two levels of priests, two qualities. So you might argue, well, this person, 3 months or 6 months or a month, how on earth can they be of the same quality as this person who was here for the last 18 years by that stage? I'm saying this opportunity here will correct or make up that difference.
Yes, but in the reality, you see the priests are coming now. It's the older priests are teaching, so it's like there is not a hierarchy of level, but you see this pattern.
Yes. I'm saying this history is needed for everybody to catch up, so that post-Panium, if we're having a class like this, I'm going to say, what are you priests doing here? Leave. You're supposed to be the teachers. The time has come where you ought to be teachers, not that one would come and teach you. So we've got to catch up by this date before we start fully engaging in a more profound way with the Levites. And if they come in, what temple was finished? So, you had your hand up?
I put this question because I think everybody think the same, I don't know. The temple is us. So, the temple is us and was finished in 2014. That means we are the temple.
So that was my sister's question when she asked, what is this temple, what are we referring to?
Exactly.
So when you build this model, you begin to throw out some of those options. So the temple is not us.
You know why? Because I'm connected to this issue. Because Jews, they didn't know what the temple is. Millerites the same. And I put this question because we are next in the line to make the same mistake.
So was this a rhetorical question?
No.
Okay.
I really want to know.
What's your opinion?
If I don't know.
Based upon this, if you accept this.
Based upon this, my opinion that temple was finished, the priest is there. And 10 Levites.
Just tell me temple equals what?
A group of people.
So temple equals people?
Equals people, yeah.
Okay.
Because
so if the temple equals people, when these people join,
yeah,
what do they become?
Become part of the temple.
So the temple grows?
Yeah.
So it's not complete?
Yes. Because priests and Levites, they form a temple on Russia.
There's no Levites in Raphia.
Panium.
There's no Levites at Panium.
So when they come?
After.
After Panium. Alright. You know my logic. Because
you know my logic.
It's important issue.
So you disagree with this model then?
I'm not disagreeing with nothing what you're saying. It's just I don't understand. Maybe if anybody here is trying to understand also.
Everyone is. Everyone's trying to understand.
If the temple is us.
Okay, what about if the temple's not us?
And that it's a problem because we don't know yet what is the temple.
Okay, but it
Because
looks
we
like
are in
it's.
2018.
When did you come in?
Probation closed, and we don't know nothing about the temple.
Sorry, say that again. 2000 and
19 closed
Yeah.
probation, and we don't know about the temple.
we've got some time. Yeah.
We able to make the same mistake as Millwright.
No, we won't make mistakes. Movement is not about making mistakes. All the information is here.
Another word.
The information is here for us to wrestle with. Sister Emma.
I think she'll have it.
Yeah.
I was going to say it seems it's different from the top line.
Emma?
In the top line, when we say the temple's complete, the inference when you said the temple's complete, now we can call the people into it. Automatically, I'm thinking all the numbers of the church triumphant are made up priests and Levites, and they're ready to call these Gentiles now. So that's what the temple is in the top line. Now we come down to the bottom line, and we're saying it can't be the people because priests are still coming into Raphia, so it can't be complete at 2014 in the sense of numbers being made up.
That's what I think.
And I think that's the complexity.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else except doctrine, with all the doctrines with foundational messages in place, it can be. I don't know if anyone else has any idea, apart from a message or the people, what can this church be?
Well, Aaron?
I think it's doctrine, because you talk about a firm platform or a foundation, that's doctrine. You step off the platform, you talk about pillars, pins, pegs, around pegs and pins, and so forth. So I think all the doctrines.
Because you've got a pre-assumption that this model looks like all the number has been made up, so you want to put numbers with numbers. Maybe you might have to reevaluate that this is not a number thing, this is about doctrine as well, all the doctrines are straightened out. Sister?
Well, I mean, there's two things in here. One is the parable of the workers. The one who comes the last are paid the same amount as the one who who was there for a long time. Those who came...
I understand the parable.
Yeah.
What's the application?
Well, the priests, you know, you said those who have been for a long time, and the new one coming, and they're part of the temple. So we could see that as...
I'm not saying they're part of the temple. I'm saying the temple is finished. And these people are being coming...
They're the priests.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you say they are new priests.
Yeah.
And you say, how can they be part of the temple? How can they be the temple if they're new?
Because you've got a model that says temple equals priest.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like this parable of the workers. Some have been there for the whole day working, and they're paid the same that who came at the last hour. They're paid the same amount. They have the same reward.
What is the reward?
The priesthood.
That's fine. You can be a priest,
Yeah.
but you want to make a temple a priest.
No, that's what you make the temple.
I didn't.
But yeah,
I
that's
never
what
said
you
that. I just drew a line here. I haven't defined what
So
the temple is.
what is, that's the thing. We ask, what is the temple?
If this is correct, the temple is not the priests.
But that's not what you said before.
What? I never said the temple was the priests. I never said that.
So you said the
It's
priests...
made up of the priests. Made by the
No, I said it's made by the priests, not made up of
They
them.
built the temple.
That's all I said. They built the temple.
Right. But then if other priests joined to build the temple, it means it's not finished.
Exactly, but this model teaches that it is finished. If this is a correct parallel to make.
So if the builders are the priests and the temple is finished, you don't need new builders because the temple is finished.
Or maybe they're not going to build, they're going to do something else.
I'm not suggesting these priests come to build.
What he's saying, you
No,
know.
he's not suggesting they come to build, so this is where they go to work now. They've finished the temple, they've got to do a work in the temple.
So,
I'm not saying I'm right, but you have to be careful not to infer that I've said stuff that I haven't said.
I'm trying to understand.
No, I understand that, but there's things that you've suggested that I've said and I haven't said.
Okay.
I've not said these people have come to join to build.
But Jesus said, destroy this temple, I will build in 3 days. So he's referring to his body,
No, he's referring to his church.
to his church, in 3 days.
3 years.
In his church as the people, is the people the church?
So you're telling me all of his church was built in 3 days? I don't think so. 3,000 people joined a few weeks later. So how can it be built if you're going to use it as people? Elder Jeff.
Elder Jeff?
I just want to point out that if Aaron's right, then he's opposing you because he's suggesting that the most important doctrine came in 2018, and you're saying the doctrines would have been finished in 2014 if the doctrines are the temple. I just want to point out that he's at odds with you.
Okay, I want to say, by the way, that the doctrines were all sorted out back here. Right back here at the increase of knowledge, we had no new doctrine past that. It's just been a refinement. I've said that on numerous occasions, and he knows I've said that.
So, 2 points. The first point is maybe the discrepancy that we're having is the same one we experienced with the jewels, in that is it the people or the doctrines, because both can, you know, and in the same way a temple can be people or doctrines, like I mentioned, the platform. And the other thing is time setting was in our movement in 2012.
But not the message of the pirate.
That she's using.
Okay. So hopefully I've answered that question. That I'm saying it's not people. We've spoken for a long while now that if people see that or accepted it, that the stones were quarried out, and when you start doing the stones that are quarried out, and you start tracking his history from 2001 to 2014, this 13-year period, there's a nice chiasm in there, because we have 2 extra waymarks here of 2004 and 2011, which is a 373 or 1010 chiasm. What we've identified in that history are 10 significant prophecy schools, which are all about doctrine, not about the waxing and waning of numbers of people joining or leaving the movement. It's all about the setting up of a structure which really primarily is a message that comes to its maturity in 2014 and allows the last group of people to come in before the close of probation.
Thank you, Brother Jeff. Jeff, sorry, pardon me.
What I'm
still understanding, but maybe further we have more light on this, because it's still not clear for me. But maybe later we have more light about what is the temple. I understand your logic. You're perfectly right.
Let me ask you a question. What are the foundations?
Truth.
The foundations of the temple, or are you telling me they're separate and distinct from the temple?
What was the foundation of the Millerite?
No, I asked the questions. You answer them.
It's the same question.
What?
The truth.
Okay, so you believe that the foundations are the truths.
Yeah.
What is the temple? Is the temple something separate and distinct from the foundation?
It's the person who stands in that truth.
The people who stand on the foundation.
Yes, the truth. They didn't move it. They stand up there.
He's saying the people are part of it.
What are the pillars and the pins? And
Like one that I know the Sabbath is the Lord's Day. That's the foundation. I'm staying on that. I'm not moving.
Can you get on?
No.
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so is the foundation still there when you get on?
Yes.
So you aren't the foundation.
I'm not the foundation. I'm on. Temple is not the foundation.
I'll let you ask the question.
Temple is up on the foundation. It's built on the foundation. The foundation is not the temple.
What's the platform?
What's the platform?
It's where you preach from.
I don't know. What's the platform?
Right, is one of the primary chapters after 1844. It's called the firm platform.
It's where you preach from. It's where you stand.
Is that something separate and distinct from the foundation?
The construction model, there are pillars and the platform is above them.
Well, yes.
So you've got pillars
Yeah, and the platform.
like that.
I think that's a platform. I don't know.
And all that is
And where are you going to build the temple?
On the platform.
So you're going to build a temple on top of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm referring on the construction model. I'm not the constructor. So I don't know.
Because then you're going to say you start building here.
no.
Yeah, because you can't build on a foundation until the foundation is complete.
It's complete, yeah.
So you say you start building the temple here, or I don't know where you finish it, but you start building here.
It's an idea, yeah. It's an idea. Took 7 years to build the house of God. And we have a date, 2021, so 2040, 7 years, 2021. It's an idea. I don't know.
You just have to get it to work in this model too. That you couldn't have a temple finished here for the Gentiles to come into.
Yes.
Your model would break down then. Because you're saying, let's build the temple here, and the temple is going to be built of people, which is priests, Levites, and Nethinims. So what?
No.
So the temple's already finished here.
Yeah.
So you're not going to parallel two histories together. You're not willing to do that. I tell you the difference between your approach and my approach,
Alright.
because it's fundamentally different. I will close my eyes and I will just jump even if I don't understand what I'm doing. If I'm sure this is correct and you agree that that's correct,
Yes.
when I drop this down,
Yeah.
line upon line, I'm saying whatever this looks like, even if I don't like the look of it, even if it seems wrong, I have to accept that it's correct.
Yes.
And you're saying it doesn't feel right to you because you want to build buildings after foundations are laid, and because you can't know where to build it, you're going to have to build it afterwards. And if you do that, you're going to break this model.
This.
Do you see where the problem
Yeah.
arises? Either you've got preconceived ideas, or you've got conceptual problems, and because this doesn't look like what you think it's supposed to look like, but this is matching exactly with this one, to me you're breaking up the methodology.
2014, it's not the Sunday law. We have some.
See where you're going to go?
Yes.
See where you'll go now?
Yeah.
You're going to break the structure and say, really, that's not even a Sunday law. I said, if that's not a Sunday law, then this is not the close of probation, then you don't have to worry about 2019 anymore, because it's just make-believe. You have no structure.
Yeah, right.
The key that undergirds all of our reform line is 2014. Without that, we have nothing. And if that is what it's portrayed to be,
Sunday law.
then you have to drop this down and make this application, and it tells you that the temple is finished, unless you're going to go back to this one and say this is not correct.
Okay.
The only question I have is that are all the priests builders? So if all the priests are builders, when in 2014 it's built, you don't need new builders. If all the priests are builders, and you see new priests are coming in, I mean, are part of the temple. So that's why I'm not right now seeing the picture exactly.
You can't have it both ways. A moment ago you told me the 11th hour workers are of the same quality and nature as all the other workers. That's what you told me.
I gave this parable not about the 11-hour workers, it was about the priests, because you said the priests. And you say, why?
To use the parable, you said the 1 hour workers receive the same wages as the others.
Yeah, but I
Let me follow through with your own logic.
Yeah.
The 1 hour workers are whom? In this line.
Yeah, but I was not talking about that one. I was talking about what you were saying about the priests.
Let me
Because
interrupt
how
you.
come- yeah.
If that's my whole point, you're not working on this line, you want to work on this one. And I want to draw you back to this one. Let's resolve this one, not concern ourselves with this one. If the 11th hour workers, which are here, are of the same quality and nature as the other workers, because they're going to receive the same reward, are they going to go into a temple that's already built or not? Or are they going to help build a temple?
They come in when it's already built.
Okay, so if you're happy here, I've got complete temple.
No, but that I understand.
Then why wouldn't this not look identical to this?
Because you say it's built and then more priests. It's about more priests coming in. That's
Okay.
what I'm not understanding.
Forget that.
Because
Forget,
that's- yeah.
it's not priests. I don't know who they are. They're a group that we can't identify.
Okay.
So, do you agree the structure is that the
Yeah.
temple's complete in 2014?
Yeah.
So now you have to tell me who is coming in from 2014 onward.
But coming in for what? Because if they are priests, they are builders.
You assume that.
No, that's what you said. I mean, that's what I understand of that you said. That's why I don't understand.
Who would come in from 14 to Raphia? To a temple that's already built? You can give them any title you want, I don't mind, but they're not building. They
No.
come into a completed structure.
Yeah, that's-
So you give me a title for them. Because Levites won't work. And you know they're not Nethinims.
Yeah, but if priests is builders, they can't work. It can't work either.
Then, okay, we'll just leave it blank then. We won't identify who half of the people in this room are, because they came in this history, but they're here. We don't know
They can be priests, but not builders.
if you're happy to use that concept.
Can be maintainers.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll move on.
Okay, so the foundation is, no, pardon, move on, yeah.
No, you already know what's going to happen. Why did the Russian people turn against Putin? Because they finally wake up to the reality of what this man has done. And I suspect what also happens is that I don't know the intricacies of what's going to happen at Panium in respect to how that interaction works. But they realise that they've been conned or duped, deceived, and all of this thing that he promised them, they're not going to get. If you go to any revolution or civil war, it always has this characteristic. It's all to do with poverty. You get the rich and you get the poor. And when that scale becomes big enough, the poor people rebel against it. So, I don't know the intricacies of it, but it's basically going to be a revolution or a civil war internally within Russia when they realise that all of these things that he's promised them are not going to come to fruition, and they say, we get rid of him and receive someone else. Sorry?
Paris at the moment?
Exactly that, yeah.
What'd she say?
Paris, at this moment. Paris has got the same issue. So I think that's what it's going to be. It's all about economic prosperity. If you give the people money, they won't rebel against you.
There's a sister in our mailing list from Russia that keeps us updated about Russia, and these kind of issues are already underway in Russia. The population is already getting frustrated with the economic situation and the escalating dictatorship that's being put back in place.
I think the problem that we have with Russia is because it's all state propaganda, the news, it always looks really good. And Putin is a master politician. It all just looks slick and smooth and good. And it's very difficult to actually know what's happening on the ground unless you know people there. So the last question here I've got is close of probation. What is close of probation for the priests at 2019? And the other one is basically, is this a moral close of probation or a prophetic close of probation? So I'll give my frank answer. I'm not 100% sure what that close of probation actually is going to look like. What my understanding at the moment is that the people who fail this test never walk again in this movement. It's completely finished for them. They don't have an opportunity to come back. I have that understanding about Rafi because that's what we're dealing with. Those people who pass that test, what does it mean for them? Does it mean, I assume that you're asking, do they have an intercessor or they don't have an intercessor? That I'm not 100% sure of. What it actually means for them with respect to sin. So I think, is it you just call it prophetic or moral? You don't use the word, oh no you do. By moral, I mean no more sin at all. Sorry, no more sin at all. Like number 2. The first thing is, I don't know why we keep on talking about sin. We shouldn't be doing sin anyway. It seems to me when people ask that question, it begs, well, what happened if you did sin? What would happen to you? You'd be sort of eternally lost. And then I normally take people to an argument, when you get to heaven, can you sin in heaven? And that discussion always ends the same way. That people often say that you can't sin in heaven, and I'm saying you can sin perfectly well in heaven, there's nothing to stop you. The only thing that prevents you from sinning is your own decision not to sin. And people say they'll quote a Bible verse that says sin shall not arise a second time, and I'm saying, well, that doesn't mean you don't have the ability to sin. It's all about choice. So the first thing I want to say is about whether or not you pick Raphia or Panium or Sunday Law or Close of Probation, Daniel 12:1. Anybody can sin anytime they want to, right through the millennium into our whole time after the controversies ended. To me, it doesn't seem an issue about sin, per se, because we can always sin. And
I don't know if you replied to the question.
Your question was, is it prophetic or moral?
The COP.
Okay, I don't think I fully understand what prophetic and moral means, but you say moral means, are we not allowed to sin anymore? And what you mean by that is, if you did sin, what would happen? What would be the consequences of it? Can you say sorry and it'll all kind of be okay, like you can today? That's behind your question. And I said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happens at Raphia with respect to, if you did some sin, what would be the consequences of that?
Because I heard you saying that we are a type of, you and Jeff, you said you are a type of the 144,000, and we know that...
You never heard me say that.
Not a type, okay.
Yes,
We
okay,
are,
I'm not a type.
Pardon, not a type. We are the 144,000,
Yes.
okay, the priests. And we know that the 144,000 they haven't got any intercessor and they're not supposed to pray, to sin.
How do you know that?
But spirit of prophecy, no?
So you tell me when she says that.
I don't know. But
Not where, when on this line does she say that happens?
For the 144,000?
That's the one that you've just identified.
It's not that when COP?
Okay, so she says it's here,
yeah.
okay, and we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what characteristics do you transfer from this waymark to this one? Remember we spoke about transferring characteristics. And your question is, do we transfer the characteristic of no more intercessor? And my answer to the question is, I'm not sure if you can transfer that characteristic from here to here.
No, from here to Raphia to Panium.
This is Panium.
Pardon.
This is Panium here. I've just done it here. You certainly transfer characteristics, but I'm not sure if that's one of them that you transfer. Elder Jim.
So does that mean that you're modifying what you've taught in the past about the Omega apostasy being that the various teachings among us that suggest that we can, as priests, move beyond the history of Raphia and still have sin? I've understood that's the basic definition of these people that have left the movement, that identifies it in a generic sense as the Omega apostasy, that they're teaching you can come to midnight and after midnight still sin. And now it sounds like you're saying you're not sure what the consequences are of
That's
that.
of the Holy Spirit being without an intercessor.
No, I don't think I'm saying that, what you just inferred that I might be saying. The issue of when they say you can bring sin right up to Raphia, tell me what they say after Raphia.
That the sin is going to be blotted out between Raphia and Panium, not before.
So when we talk about the blotting out of sin, I assume that's the record taking of the books.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that happens between 2014 and Raffia, so it stops there. The problem with all of this is we're taking this model and we're fractalizing it all. So the structure leads you and guides and directs you to the fact that when you get to Raffia being, that shouldn't have been, yeah, Raffia being closed of probation. I said Panion before, for the record, for the camera. I should have meant Raffia, not Panion when I said that. This closed of probation, what characteristics do we take over? So if here, we've got the books that are being checked, then when we come to this place and we say no more intercessor, I'm not sure if that argument is the same as the issues that the other people were having, because what they're saying is you can carry on sinning all the way through here. And not only are they saying you can carry on all the way sinning, they're saying you can't stop sinning. To me, that was the argument that, if you ask him if I changed something, that I've fought against, is the idea that you can stop sinning yesterday, or if we're going to take it at a prophetic level from 9/11, and they're saying you don't even have the ability to do that because your nature doesn't allow that to happen, and that there's some nature change that happens here at Raffia. And what I've argued is the nature change happens here at 9/11, not at Raffia.
Well, I know one of those people teach that however you want to define the sin, it gets removed between Raffia and Panion. The process of the binding up.
And what I've understood that to mean is that because at Raffia there's a nature change which I think they say, because I haven't heard that presentation, I think that they get that model from glory. This is where the real glory is going to come, not this type or fake one that was at 9/11. That's how I identify that the sin is blotted out here because of the nature change. I'm saying the sin problem was dealt with at least back in this history and by 9/11. So by the time you get to 9/11, that's when that nature change happened, not at this way marked Raffia. So the secondary point that I'm making is, by the time you get to the close of probation, where the wheat and tares are split, and the wheat are bound up and put into a garner, what does that mean for an individual's experience, whether or not they have an intercessor or not? That is, I'm saying I'm not sure, but I don't think that changes anything that I've taught about the nature of man, and I think it's not saying what they teach about the sin problem and how it's eradicated in a human being, when they say that it's in this history that sin is dealt with.
If you put away sin before Raffia, why would you need an intercessor thereafter?
I understand that logic. If you were going to be doing this properly, I need to say you wouldn't need an intercessor from 9/11. There's no need for one if you are very careful and you follow the rules properly. Sister Kathy.
Okay, I always understood that, this is in my mind, you go 9/11 up to midnight, and that is where the priest's close of probation is, either one side or the other side, and that's where their closed door is. And then shortly thereafter, in that time period between midnight and midnight cry, is some sort of earthliness removed from them. I don't understand it fully, but there is something that happens in that time period, but it isn't taking away of sin. It's something else. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. The sin problem has been dealt with in the history before. That's what I and others have been battling against when we, in the context of what we fought against, what the Omega have taught, is that they're saying our nature is not capable of dealing with the sin problem until some special supernatural event happens at Raphia that changes our very nature. And to me, that does away with all New Testament theology, where Paul says it changes at baptism, not here at Raphia. It changes here when a person goes from the kingdom of Satan to the kingdom of heaven. The subject of whether or not we need an intercessor, why would we need an intercessor if we've done away with the sin problem and we've been sealed by Raphia? What would be the point of all of that? I'm well aware, without naming names, that more than one of the people who used to teach with us, who were part of the Omega, have separated from them because of concerns that they've seen in the modelling that they've done over this history, because they can clearly see that what they're teaching is wrong. I'm not sure 100% exactly what they've seen that's wrong, but in that separation that they've had, what they've said that we are teaching wrong is that Christ's intercession for a priest ends at Raphia. And what they're saying is that's not so, that whatever you want to call this history from 9/11 to Son-in-Law to close probation, the place where you have no more intercession is Daniel 12:1 here only. It's not this progressive close of probation. And all I'm saying is, not that I agree with that, but I understand what the person is saying, and I haven't got strong arguments except through fractals that here we should expect no more intercession to happen, which would be a characteristic that we drag from here all the way to here. Part of the problem that I have with that is not the logic of that, because the logic is there. It's the fact that 2014, which would be here, is a Sunday law because it possesses characteristics of the Sunday law, but we haven't dragged all the properties of the Sunday law and brought that to here because there was no law. Even if there was a law in the United States, and I think you could argue that there was, connected to the Patriot Act when it got revised, that it still doesn't meet the criteria of a Sunday law. It might do in principle in some way, but it's not a Sunday law that talks about Saturday and Sunday. It doesn't possess those characteristics where people are now forced to do something against their consciences. It comes in a different form, a different shape. So even though it may have characteristics, latter rain, it doesn't possess all the qualities of it. So when we come to this here and we say, does it possess the quality that no more intercession? I'm not sure if it possesses that quality or not. That's all I'm answering to the question that was asked, because I think that's what is behind that question. But what I am saying is, the books are being dealt with, the seal has been placed upon that person, and once that seal has been placed, there's an expectation that there's no sin problem going on afterwards. This problem that's being addressed here is the same problem that we've had from the very beginning in our movement, because when we mark a close of probation here, what are we saying about Adventism when we say the temple's complete? If we used to teach that this is a close of probation for Adventism, first the church then the world, what did that mean? Because we never went into that and said that means that there's no intercessor and Daniel 12:1 gets dragged back to here. We just stated it as a fact that's a close of probation without fine-tuning or defining in detail what the nature of that close of probation was. We just marked it as a shut door. I don't think we've ever gone back and say, what are the implications of all of that? So I'm just acknowledging.
I have, and that's why I'm kind of nervous about what you're saying.
So you've identified that Michael stands up here.
No, not there, at Raphia.
Before Raphia ever existed.
No, haven't done it that way, but in the model I intend to share tomorrow with the temple dedication and the beginning of the work of the priest between Raphia and Peniam, that's the implication of the glory that fills the temple and the fire that comes down on them.
So, when you say that's the implication, that's what I see the implication is. So I get the implication, but someone's asked me a direct question, and I'm saying the problem that I have is the implication is that Michael stands up here. I get that. I see a logic for that. The problem that I don't have the ability to defend is that 2014 is not the Sunday law. If we're going to take the very nature of property of COP here and bring it to Raphia in its completeness, we don't have the ability to do that with the loud cry. We don't have the ability to do that with the Sunday law. They don't own those same properties in their completeness. And I'm just acknowledging that.
I get that, but in spite of that, in spite of needing to take the end time characteristics and see them intimated in these previous waymarks that we line them up in, what I'm suggesting is that the construction and dedication of the temple and the begin of the service of the priest has its own implications that need to be established, and I see that those implications agree with the future characteristics. What I'm saying is that when we begin to serve as priests between Raphia and Peniam, it's a genuine reflection of the work of Christ. I don't see any room for the argument against these people still need intercession. And I'm not arguing against the intercessor there. Anyway, you can critique what I present tomorrow.
So let me summarize if I understand what you've just said. What I've done is I've taken a line here, dropped these waymarks down, and have said, so that you're all aware, that you can't take all the characteristics of this waymark and bring it down. There's an acknowledgement of that. And I'm saying, if you can't do it here, can we do it here? So that's how I've answered that question. So if I understand what Elder Jeff has said, he said he's taken another line of evidence, another model, and that other model, the implications of that is that 2014 is not a Sunday law. 2014 is symbolizing another waymark.
The finishing of the temple.
So I've got that here. Once you start working on a different model, that this temple is complete, the question is the temple really complete here? Because that's not really a Sunday law, if I can use that kind of logic. The question is the temple really built here? And I would say yes. I believe it's really built here. It's a real phenomena. I would say it's not the only place that you can mark a building of a temple, but this is a hard waymark. It's really built. If you do that, and then you start following through, I presume, in the preceding verses, the verses that come afterwards, that you're going to see that there's some work that's being done to and upon the priests, the dedication of the priests. And once you see that, then you're able to get to this stage and say this is not Michael standing up, close of probation. It's not that waymark because it's a different model. But now it's, I'll just put the priests, the dedication of the priest.
Okay.
And it's based upon that principle that these priests are now serving in a role where there's no self-analysis happening to them. They're the administrators of this new covenant relationship. Just like we would argue that the third angel is not a human being, in the sense that the third angel is outside of the problem. He's outside of the field in Matthew 13. Matthew 13 is about plants, and plants is about you, not about the servant. The story is about the plants, not the servants. I think we understand that, wheat and tares. The servants are part of that story, but they're not part of the problem. The enemy didn't do anything to them. They're here to counteract the work of the enemy. So in that context, the priests then, if I understand what Elder Jeff is saying, come outside of the great controversy, the sin problem. They serve in a different function. They serve, if I can say it this way, as the intercessors for God's people who are about to come in and not even about to come in, because the Levites are already here. They're being addressed and dealt with by these priests. So if we're going to start saying that we're going to bring another model which is independent of a Sunday law model but maps the same waymarks, then you've got a line of evidence to say that this is showing you that even though that's not a real Sunday law, it's a real temple completion, and that it tells you that now these priests are serving in a different capacity, not as human beings, but as Melchizedek, if you like, people outside of the sin problem, which is the role here of the 144,000 in this history. They're outside of the sin problem. And therefore then you could go back into this model and say when you go from close of probation to here, this is a hard COP, and the suggestion that we've made for some time, I've made it for quite some time, that this is where Michael would stand up. Therefore the answer to your question would be, yes, it is a moral issue, that there is no intercession. But I think you need a separate model for that. I find it difficult to take this parallel model and make that what I've just said. And the reason I'm struggling with that is because of this waymark here. And I can't defend to treat this waymark and this waymark in different ways. I can explain stuff. I can explain this is the end sign that's lifted up. But it's not a second advent. This is us, the stone that goes to do a work. But it's not the second advent. So it has characteristics, but it's not a hard second advent. That's why I'm struggling with this one. So if there's this line of evidence here, then we have an independent witness that this would be a close of probation. And my understanding is, I don't know if this is how Elder Jeff is explaining it, that the priests come outside of the sin problem, and they're only able to do that because they no longer require an intercessor. Because in reality, they become the intercessor.
No, because you should be doing that right now, and we know we have an intercessor.
We should be doing what right now?
Not sinning.
Yes, yeah, I'm saying the problem is not just about not sinning. The not sinning problem is separate to this model. This model isn't about whether or not you did sin. This model is about, if the temple's completed, these priests are now not part of the problem. They're standing here and they're saying, we're going to minister to you folks. You folks have got mortality problems or issues. I'm not saying there's sin problems, but me, the priest, I'm not part of that problem. I'm here to serve you.
I'll deal with this tomorrow, so I'll just say this briefly. I don't think the line is only about the priest. I think Christ is our example and he's the high priest, but he's also the offering, and we become the offering. And that offering had to be pure. And he had to take a human body upon himself in order to die on the cross. So before you can be that offering, you have to have the incarnation, you have to have humanity and divinity and divine, because you're required not only to be the priest, but the offering, and that gives you, to me, the strongest witness that you can't have any imperfections in that history, because you're the offering too. But I'll deal with that tomorrow, Lord willing.
So, hopefully I answered all your questions.
It was Sophie on question.
Whoever's question these were, I don't know.
This mine.
Okay. Did I answer your questions? Yeah? If you just base it upon here, I don't think you could show this is close of intercession. But I think you can through this other model. I'm warming up to that quite rapidly. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. We want to ask and pray for a blessing upon us and upon the sacredness of the questions and discussion that we've had. Lord, help each of us to be able to settle into these truths so that we might have a full comprehension of what it means for the temple to be completed, what it means to be a priest, and what it truly means to come to Raphia and all the implications of what that means. Lord, as we've already discussed towards the end of our study, the thoughts and ideas that we had originally come to, that intercession would indeed stop at Raphia, appear to have a strong second witness to them, and we ask, Lord, that you would prepare us for tomorrow's study so that we might be awake and attuned to accepting these truths and to discussing them. We thank you for your goodness and mercy towards us. In Jesus' name, amen.